Hello and welcome back to CME's Institute Spring 2020 second day curriculum. We're going to continue our exploration of equity index futures and options with an investigation into BTIC and TACO. For those of you that may not be familiar with what those acronyms identify, BTIC is short for basis trade at index close, and we're going to investigate that now. A basis trade is simply the difference between the futures price and its underlying physical or cash product. There's corn basis, there's wheat basis, there's gold basis, there's treasury bond basis, there's, yes, equity index basis. Simply the difference between the price of the futures contract and its underlying equity index itself. So that basis trade is particularly important to our large equity indexers and people pegged to the underlying benchmark index. When they engage in trading in the futures market, many cases, and in most cases, they're very, very much concerned about the basis relationship between where they execute their futures contracts and the underlying index itself, because they're going to be measured on a day-to-day basis on how their portfolio, which includes those futures contracts, is measured against the index itself. So where they execute those contracts relative to the index is of key significance. BTIC is designed to help them execute their futures trades at any time during the day session based on a basis spread number, which is negotiated and traded actively as a spread, but getting their futures positions marked to market at a spread-related price to the spot index at close. So their whole portfolio is going to be pegged to the index based on a daily closing. They want the futures contracts in that basis spread relationship settled to the same indexing value. This has been a solution to a perennial problem for a lot of our big users, because they don't have to jam everything in at around 3 o'clock Chicago time to get their prices executed close to the index closing value, which is 4 p.m. Eastern time, an hour ahead of Chicago. Here are the mechanics. The basis itself is very, very tame in terms of its intraday trading. With the exception of high periods of volatility in the index or high volatility in the expectations of forward dividend payments, the basis is very, very tame. So that if we agree as traders that we're each going to transact 500 contracts of the E-mini S&P, and we agree to a basis equivalent of negative 1.5 index points, we can do this trade and report it to CME within 5 minutes of execution. And then that day's settlement of the spot contract will determine where we mark the futures positions. If the spot index on that day's close is at 31.20 and 18, we simply subtract the 1.5 index points from that number to arrive at the equivalent futures price. And remember, it doesn't have to be rounded to 1/4 of a point now to that index value. So the long and the short position agreed to execute at negative 1.5 index points. The index for that day settles at 31.20 and 18 in index value. The futures contract is that number minus the basis, or a futures settlement of 31.1868. Both long and the short get that contract's settlement value in their futures account, and then the next day it's marked to market just like any other position that's executed. Why might this be important to a large indexer? Because they're going to be pegged to the market's settlement value. This is what matters the most to them. And getting their futures contract at a fixed spread to that number is very, very important. Another consideration is that the BTIC's minimum tick increment is smaller than the E-mini S&P's minimum tick increment. So being able to execute even if you're crossing the bid and offer spread in BTIC, is going to be less expensive than crossing the bid and offer spread in the outright E-mini S&Ps. So I'm able to execute with greater assurance of getting my basis spread, but I'm also doing it at a reduced market impact cost. These two considerations are what drives this business, because it's a natural solution to a perennial problem for indexers. This has been a real big gain for our bigger users, and as a result, it's been extended to most of our index products. The block sizes are certainly not onerous in terms of being able to get stuff done. So if you're an indexer or you need to get your futures contracts at least marked to close to the index close, BTIC is an excellent resource for you, and as a result, you can see why the volume and the open interest in these products continues to grow, percentage of the volume continues to grow. The flip side of that is what we call trade at contract open, shortened to TACO. And TACO is basically a BTIC trade, but it's done on the opening. You may recall from our day one session on equities in the foundational principles lessons, we talked about this concept of a SOQ, special opening quotation, that indexers provide every day on their index products. It's used for the final settlement of the futures contract, but that special opening quotation, which is based on the actual opening prices of an index's constituent companies' share values, goes into what is known as the contract trade at open function. A lot of options are settled based on this SOQ number, and as a result, we offer being able to do a trade anytime during the session that will be marked to the trade at contract open number, which is a BTIC transaction but done on the opening rather than the closing valuation. So think about TACO as BTIC but for the open, and it can be done anytime, I think within an hour prior to the opening session at 8:30 Chicago time. In addition to just the regular daily BTIC, we've also recently, in the fourth quarter of this last year, launched BTIC and TACO Plus. And what these refer to are the similar transactions of BTIC and TACO, basis trade at index close and trade at contract open, but for T plus settlement days. In other words, instead of having the price of your basis settled to today's settlement, a BTIC Plus allows you to extend that to a basis trade that will settle 2 days, 3 days, 5 days from now. TACO, same thing. Instead of settling to the next session's opening valuation, it could be a day session plus 1 or 2 or 3. BTIC Plus and TACO Plus could be particularly useful primarily for options trading, where an options settlement will occur and you want to lock in your basis relationship to the index prior to that day. The mechanics are structured in this slide. You can see you can agree to a trade on one day, but not have it settle for several days after. The trade itself may fluctuate in terms of the basis level, and unlike BTIC and TACO, because these have multiple days until their final settlement, there is a margin requirement on these. These are open positions. It's a basis trade for an open position. So there could be variation margin depending on the movement of the basis between execution day and final settlement of the transaction. Same with TACO. This is a highly specialized product but has gained an enormous following in the last year or so because it answers a true solution to a real problem, and that's getting your futures contracts pegged to a basis spread to the index open or the index close. CME has extended it into its BTIC and TACO Plus functionality based on market demand. And those contracts, while they're not as actively traded, or that functionality is not as actively traded, it is something that's beginning to get some tailwind to it. So if you've got any questions about how BTIC and TACO or BTIC Plus and TACO Plus work, don't hesitate to ask us. This is an important product functionality for a lot of our larger institutional and risk management clients. We will be happy to provide you with more information about it. Feel free to reach out to me for further information. And thank you for being with us for this short segment on Equity Index Futures and Options 2.0 in the Day 2 curriculum of our CME Spring 2000 Institute. Stay with us because there's several more lessons in our Equity 2.0 curriculum, Day 2 curriculum. So stay tuned for further of those, and thank you for your time and attention.